I will attempt to speak slowly so that the translators can translate what I'm saying. So very nice to see you all in this very international Sangha Day. I've actually just come from the Cuernavaca Buddhist Center where we have our Sangha Day going on right now. And there's actually a Mitra ceremony happening as we do this transmission. So in the first part of this session, we're going to do a short reflection, contemplation, about gratitude. This, in some ways, is the theme that we're following today in relationship to Sangha. So I've based this reflection on one of the Tibetan reflections, which are called the Four Preliminary Reflections or the Four Reminders. Maybe many of you know those reflections. And the first of those is called the precious human birth. So we reflect on the precious human birth. And in the traditional reflection, we reflect on all kinds of conditions that enable us to be doing what we're doing right now. But in the reflection that I'm going to lead, I've simplified that a little bit. So I invite you to sit comfortably. I know it's quite strange doing a kind of meditation, contemplation online, but we're going to try it. And if you wish, you can close your eyes. And this will take about 10 minutes, this contemplation. First of all, you can contact your body, the sensations in your body. Perhaps you're sitting in a chair, so you can feel your weight on the chair. I can feel the breeze from outside. Perhaps it's cooler where you are. And as we notice our body, as we notice the sensations of the body, we can recognize that we have the blessing of a human body with senses. And this blessing enables us to learn and talk and to understand the Dharma. We've all been blessed with the precious human birth. Not only have we been blessed with this human body, but we've also been fortunate to be born at a time when the Dharma is being taught, where the Dharma is available, when the Buddha has expounded the Dharma. And we can hear the Dharma. Not only can we hear the Dharma, but we can also practice it. We are blessed with that opportunity. And we're not on our own. We have encountered a Sangha. We have encountered spiritual friends who help and support us on our path when things are difficult. They console us. They inspire us. We have had the tremendous good fortune to encounter the Triratna Buddhist community, a living Sangha, where we are welcomed. To practice the Dharma alone is difficult. To encounter a Sangha is a great blessing. And we have also encountered the blessing of a teacher, Urgyen Sangharakshita, who has interpreted and explained the meaning of the Dharma for us today. Which means that we can understand the important fundamental principles of the Dharma. And we know how to apply them to our particular lives, wherever we are, whoever we are. To have encountered Sangharakshita's interpretation of the Dharma is a great blessing. And so we can honor these blessings through gratitude, but even more importantly, through cherishing those blessings. And that means to practice the Dharma, to go for refuge to the three jewels. So during the rest of this online Sangha afternoon, Sangha evening, Sangha morning, we can remember the precious blessings that we have received. and we can resolve that we will not squander them. That we will make full use of our precious human birth. So when you're ready, you can bring your contemplation to an end. And we'll just take a few moments before we continue with the next activity. So welcome to those who have arrived during the reflection that we were doing. And I'm just looking across the screen and I'm seeing people from many different places, from New Zealand, from the United States, from Sevilla in Spain, I can see. Muy buenas noches, buenas tardes. It's very nice to be with you all. And speaking about blessings, it is my blessing to be able to do this dialogue with Subhuti, and it's an even greater blessing to be able to introduce him. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to introduce Subhuti a little bit, and then he and I are going to talk about the theme of Sangha. And I'm going to introduce you, Subhuti, in a bit of a different way. And I'm hoping that the way that I introduce you will connect a little bit with what we hope to talk about. So when I was thinking about introducing Subhuti, the obvious things came to mind: when he was ordained, how many books he's written, all these kinds of things. But actually, I've been studying quite a lot of French phenomenology in recent months. And one of the philosophers who's particularly caught my attention is called Jean-Luc Marion. And one of his concepts is called the saturated phenomenon. The saturated phenomenon. And a saturated phenomenon is a phenomenon that you can never fully capture with concepts. You can never fully grasp it because it's so big and rich that you just don't have the tools to be able to fully know what you're facing, what is in front of you. Subhuti is a saturated phenomenon in that sense. I've written down here that Subhuti is so big that you can't actually stand back from him and see all that he is. He's just so big. But he is a very, very inspiring man, at least for me. And I will mention, Subhuti, that you're the author of various books. I'll say notably Sangharakshita, A New Voice in the Buddhist Tradition. And more recently, Mind in Harmony, which is Subhuti's commentary on Abhidhamma. And Subhuti has ordained many, many men. I suspect that he may not know how many people he has ordained. But one of them, I'm sure he does know this, one of them is me. So hopefully he remembers that. He was the first chair of the Preceptors College. And these days, he does a lot of work in India. He gives many retreats, many talks and so on there. And to finish, I wanted to say this, that Subhuti is the principal interpreter in our order of Sangharakshita's teachings. I would be as bold as to say that, at least so far. So that is Subhuti. I wondered if Subhuti would like to say something.
Well, of course, Nagapriya, inevitably, I have to say, aren't all phenomena saturated?
I think that's true. I think it's true, which is probably one of the weaknesses of Jean-Luc Marion's perspective. He isolates the saturated phenomenon to just a few things, but actually the other or all others are saturated phenomena. Yeah. But I was particularly thinking about it in relationship to you, because of what
you're pretty saturated yourself, Nagapriya.
Soaking. So so that this is me and Subhuti. We're going to have this dialogue about Sangha. I wondered if you wanted to say anything of an introductory nature about Sangha, Subhuti, before we start to become more precise. Our general intention is to talk about the theme of spiritual friendship, and we particularly want to talk about the topic of intergenerational friendship in the context of the Sangha. So I'll see if Subhuti has some initial remarks.
Yes, I think it's very important to keep the idea of Sangha firmly connected to the idea of friendship. This is something very distinctive in Bhante's particular presentation of the Dhamma. I think there's no Sangha without friendship. And I'm at the moment at Adhisthana with the Adhisthana teaching community, which consists of some 30 or 40 senior disciples of Sangharakshita. There are 22 of us here now. And what's really striking to me is how strong my connections are with most of those people. I've got connections with everybody. I've got friendships with probably almost everybody. And with some of them, very deep, very old friendships. And that is the basis of the order. And it's very striking that you and I are here talking now, Nagapriya. And we're such good friends over such a long period of time. And even though I'm 70 years older than you, no, what is it? 20 years, is it 20 or 30 years? I can't remember.
20, yeah.
20 years older than you. We have such a strong and positive link. And that, to me, is the essence of Sangha. I don't think you can separate Sangha from individual friendships. In a certain sense, there's no such thing as Sangha in general, if you know what I mean. Sangha is always particular. And Sangha as a general phenomenon is the aggregation of particular friendships. Friendships, of course, like ours, based on the three jewels, based on commitment to the three jewels.
I keep thinking of things to enrich what you've just said, and then you say it.
Yeah.
So I think just to recap a little bit of what you're saying, I find that it's quite easy to bandy the word Sangha about quite a lot in a vague way, which sometimes doesn't mean anything very concrete. And what I'm hearing from you is that really the building blocks or the cells of the Sangha, the elements of the Sangha, are individual friendships, and that is what makes up the Sangha. And those friendships are particular. They're not just, oh, you're a Buddhist, I'm a Buddhist, and therefore we're Sangha. It's something much more specific than that, much more intimate than that.
It's not a bad starting point, but it's not the real thing, as it were. But for instance, you and I are now talking. I've never been to Cuernavaca yet, pero muy voy el año que viene. But you are connected to a lot of people there. So in a way, I'm connected to them through you. And I personally feel that very strongly.
So we've got a kind of a network of connections, or a net of connections, that we may not individually have friendships with everyone in the Sangha, but through that network of connections, we'll have a friendship with someone who has a friendship with someone, and that all connects us together across the world.
Anybody who's a friend of yours is a friend of mine.
And I can think of so many examples of that, Subhuti. For instance, to give one biographical example, you ordained me in 1992, if you can remember that far back. And on that retreat, I was 22, by the way, at that time, but on that retreat, Subhuti told me that 3 months before, he had ordained an Indian guy in India called Nagaketu. Perhaps you can see the link in the name there, Nagapriya Nagaketu. And Subhuti suggested on the ordination retreat that I write to Nagaketu as a way of trying to connect with someone who lives in a different place, who has a different experience of life, and who also is a member of our order. So I did that, and we started to correspond. And then if you remember, a few years later, Subhuti, I went to India, and the three of us were together there in India, staying at Nag Bhavan, if I remember correctly, in Nagpur. And even after that, Nagaketu came to visit me in the UK. He actually lived with me for about 1.5 years in the UK. So these are how these links start to develop and strengthen.
Can I pick up something? You mentioned your ordination in 92, and I do remember very well, because I think there were something like 18 or 20 people ordained, and we were doing one ordination a night. So yours was the last because you were the youngest, and you were bursting because you could hardly contain yourself for your private ordination. But that aside, you were 22, I was probably 45 or so. And I'm sort of interested what that signified for you, being in connection with a man who was, twice your age. And was that at all awkward? Was it problematic or useful, interesting?
Yeah, thanks for that, Subhuti. There were actually 26 men ordained on that retreat.
Gosh, it was almost a month.
And that meant that we had 26 nights of private ordinations. And because it was in chronological order, I was the youngest, so I was the last. So I had to witness 25 people going for their private ordination and wondering if mine would ever happen. And this was during late May and early June in southern Spain. And it was getting hotter and hotter and hotter. And at least it seemed to me that the pujas seemed to be getting longer and longer and longer every evening. But yeah, well, I mean, speaking about that, I did actually make a couple of notes about this, Subhuti. And as you know, we talk a lot about witnessing in relationship to ordination. Actually, as I was thinking about the idea of witnessing, you witnessed my going for refuge in my private ordination and my public ordination too. And you gave me the name Nagapriya, which is one of the greatest blessings that I've ever received. And my experience of receiving that name was not, oh God, why did he give me that? It was more like, how did he know that? How could he come up? How did he know? That was the experience. And I was just so inspired by the name that I was given, and still am. But going back to this theme of witnessing, I think the witnessing happens not just in the private ordination or the public ordination, but it happens all the time. And I've had the very, very strong experience ever since I met you of feeling that you were witnessing and affirming what in me wanted to go for refuge. And particularly when you're quite a young person, I met you when I was 19. Well, I didn't have very much confidence and I knew very, very little about Buddhism. I had no idea what I was doing, basically. But almost from the first time that we spoke, I felt that you were taking me and you were aware of me and you were witnessing me with love, I think, witnessing me go for refuge to the Three Jewels. That was very, very important for me and is very important. And it was never, I think you said, was it weird or something? It was never weird, but astonishing. It was astonishing and remains astonishing. I've written down here, Subhuti is the source of Adhisthana, blessing, at least for me, and you always have been. but that's not necessarily easy to take. So it's not necessarily awkward. It's not awkward, but it's quite a thing. You know, it's quite a big thing to absorb. I wrote down also one of my favorite Rilke quotes from the Duino Elegies. And Rilke says, I'm sorry about this, Subhuti, but Rilke says, every angel is terrifying. So if you come into contact with somebody who you feel is really in touch with the meaning of going for refuge, who's really in touch with the Dharma, that is very, very inspiring, but it's also quite terrifying because it's a challenge. I don't think you consciously meant to challenge me in a bad way, but it's inevitably so. Inevitably, your own depth of going for refuge challenges me and demands that I do the same, that I change and deepen into myself. I've got a bit more if you want it. So I was thinking about that. I've been reading a little bit about Sufism recently, and particularly Padmavajra passed me a short text by this Sufi master. And in this text, the Sufi master kind of undergoes a very, very profound experience of touching reality. He obviously uses the language of God, but I wouldn't use that language. But he uses some very interesting metaphors, which I strongly relate to my experience of being in relationship to you, Subhuti. And one of them is the metaphor of being branded. So to be branded, if you can imagine it, it's something indelible. Once it's happened, you can never turn back from that. And it marks you in the sense that it now informs your life, and it can never not inform your life. So my friendship with you and my connection with you has been very much like that. It's something that once it had happened, or once I've known you, it's something I could never undo. Even as you say, when we've been apart for quite a long time, you're always in my mind, usually, well, speaking to me, sometimes consoling me, at times admonishing me. But you're always there as a presence, you know. So in that sense, that idea of being branded by the pure light that is Subhuti.
It's interesting you talked about it from your side of it, as it were. And I've been reflecting quite a bit on this issue of intergenerational friendship, because it's inevitably become somewhat suspect in the modern environment, and not for entirely bad reasons. But I've been reflecting on how important it is to the life of the Sangha that there are friendships between people of all generations. And I think it's a sad reflection on our modern society that this has come under suspicion, and that it's more and more unusual. The generations are more separated from each other, if I'm correct in my general analysis. But I wanted to sort of say something about my experience of being in relation to you when I was 42 or something and you were 19, because it was a great, great delight to me to be in relationship to you, seeing you responding to the Dhamma through me, as it were, which is, after all, what is most important and deepest in me. To see that responded to by you is of enormous satisfaction and joy. And to see you blossoming in the Dhamma over the years up to your ordination and beyond. Right now, you're now a public preceptor. I was the first, one of the first generation of public preceptors, and now you are in that position. So it's of deep, deep satisfaction. I suppose probably the nearest analogy you could think of is with parenthood, but it's something more than that, because it is on the basis of the Dhamma. This mutual delight. Bhante talks about friendship, spiritual friendship, as consisting in mutual awareness and taking delight in each other. And I took great delight in you and I looked forward to you coming. I know you always thought that I'd forgotten who you were, but I took great delight in you coming. And I remember you reminded me the other day that you said you felt every time you came on retreat at Pamela, you were in a different group, and you wanted some consistency of connection. So I said, okay, every time you come, you'll be in my group. And that was because of the sort of the spark that there was between us. I've been dangerously thinking of this in terms of eros. And please, everybody, be quite clear. Nagapriya and I have actually not the slightest trace of sexual interest in each other. I don't think so, anyway. But there's something more than just a sort of rational interest, although we are similarly minded. We're both somewhat philosophical in interests and so on. But the connection is at some other level, as I say, eros in the true old-fashioned Platonic, Neoplatonic sense of a deep attraction of soul, if you like, to use that language. And I felt that very strongly in relation to you. And I saw you feeling it in relation to me. Yes, there are different sides of the equation at that point, but it's not limited by our difference in age. And I think as long as that sort of spark is there intergenerationally, our order and our movement will live and will be something special. As soon as it becomes merely formulaic, it's dead. I didn't just respond to you because I was a preceptor. You were, what do they call it? An ordination requestee. It was my job to look after you. It was my job, but my job was never to me just a job. It was always a very personal response to everybody, but in relation to you, you responded to me so strongly, I could not but respond to you. And very, very fruitful for me, as well as for you. So I really hope that you and I can share with others the joy of that kind of friendship. And I hope that is much strengthened in our order and movement. And that, yes, we need to deal with the complexities that sometimes go on within it, the complexities of, relations between parents and children and all that sort of thing gets mixed up with it. And also sometimes the sexual. But I think that erotic in the strict sense of something, an attraction that is more than merely reason or even emotion, an attraction of spirit, is extremely important between the generations. I had that with Bhante at its best, as it were. Didn't always find him easy to get on with, but he reached deep into me. And well, I can't say from his side what the response was, but that was extremely important to me as a young man, pretty much the same age as you were when I first met you. And he was pretty much the same age as I was. So I really hope that spirit is maintained. And maybe we're better at it these days and cleaner about it, but it's extremely important.
In a way, Subhuti, you're starting to touch on the theme, I think, of lineage or the lineage of Kalyana Mitrata. And
yes.
When I heard you speak about Bhante, I remembered that my main connection with Bhante was not necessarily directly with Bhante himself, although I did meet him quite a few times and obviously I've studied his books. But actually, I think I got to know Bhante much better through you.
Yes.
Because of your relationship with him.
Yes.
And so I felt that, you were able to transmit to me something of your connection with Bhante and something of what he means to you and the value of his teachings, his approach to the Dharma. I've been able to learn some of that. And one of the things that your friendship has left me with is the responsibility to offer that to the next generation, people, in this case, terrifying to think it, but yeah, who are younger than me. So people who are now in their 20s and 30s and wanting to connect with the meaning of their lives, wanting to connect with the Dharma.
Even 19. in their teens.
Well, actually, we do have here Moksharati in Cuernavaca.
Ah,
Moksharati came along for the first time when he was 19,
ah,
and he tells me that I was the first person that he met when he walked through the door, and he was ordained this January. So he was the first person from Cuernavaca to be ordained. He's 25 now.
ah.
So, you know, that feels like something of that that spirit, that transmission of Kalyana Mitrata carrying on.
Yeah, I would say that what Bhante communicated more than anything was himself in Kalyana Mitrata, in very different ways with different people. But he certainly communicated that spirit to me. And I've tried my best to communicate that to others. And, you know, very good to hear that you yourself feel you're trying to communicate that too. Then the Sangha is alive and will remain so.
When I went to visit Subhuti at Padmaloka, when I went on going for refugee retreats, his habit would be to take me on very long walks, which usually involved getting lost at some point and being dragged through brambles. That generally seemed to be part of the
Look what it's done for you. It's made a good public preceptor of you.
But the other thing that I was thinking about as well was that I was often quite disconcerted that I would see you and we'd talk, and you'd never ask me something like, how is your meditation practice going? Or have you got any ethical confessions? Or how are your friendships with other order members? You would just talk about whatever you wanted to talk about. Maybe you were reading a book, maybe you had some reflection about the Dharma, and you would just talk about that. And that is what we would talk about. And I often found myself thinking, oh, you know, is there something wrong here? Should I be trying to talk more about my meditation practice? Should I be asking more advice? What should I do? But actually, as you indicated a bit earlier, that it was a very spontaneous and natural thing. It wasn't framed by, you know, a kind of formal relationship, like a job interview. It was a friendship. It remains a friendship. And as you have said many times, Bhante says that the spirit of our community and the spirit of our order is caught rather than taught.
Yeah.
And I think the way in which it is caught is through those spiritual friendships, not through just study alone or reading.
I don't know whether you remember the story Subhadra tells in his book on Dada Rinpoche, but he says that Dada Rinpoche said that he learned a lot from Sangharakshita. So what had he learned? Well, he said he'd always taught very formally, you know, on the right number of cushions, with the right offerings given and so forth. But with Bhante, they just met in friendship and talked in this mixture of Nepali and Hindi and English and Tibetan, their own idiolect. But yes, he taught Bhante in the context of friendship. And that's quite striking, that somebody of such depth, and Bhante said he regarded him as a living bodhisattva, but that he learned the power of friendship as a vehicle for teaching. You're not really teaching, you're just communicating. When you're really teaching, you're just communicating. And so, you know, if things would come up which related to your experience in meditation, I don't remember anything like this, but we'd talk about it. I wouldn't need to seek it out in a sort of formal way. Or if there were, you were very, very honest, ruthlessly, admirably honest. So if there was something that you were uneasy about your own behavior, it would naturally arise and we'd naturally talk about it.
I just assumed that you could read my mind anyway, so I didn't need to say things out loud.
Fortunately, I couldn't.
Well, that's just as well, I think. Yeah.
Fortunately, you couldn't read mine.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're talking about spiritual friendship. We're talking about intergenerational friendship. But I think for many people, it's not necessarily that easy to cultivate friendships or even find someone to make friends with. Have you got any thoughts about how to go about it?
Mm, mm, mm. Well, you just sort of find people who there's some spark with, and you connect with them, and particularly the Dhamma connection. And generally speaking, what my experience is that, of course, it's easier with someone than with others because there's a natural psychic sort of affinity, as it were. But generally speaking, if you spend time with people and you commit yourself to it to some degree, friendship arises. I remember when I was first at Padmaloka, when I moved to Padmaloka to be Bhante's secretary, there was one member of the community who was a bit outside, and Bhante suggested that I formed a friendship with him. So I said, well, I've tried many different ways, but I just can't get any spark. So he just said, when he's working in the garden, just go and work with him. So I did. I just went and worked with him. And in that working together, we formed a friendship. I wasn't going to sit down with him and say, now, X, how are you doing? That wouldn't work. It just didn't operate like that. So I think you need to gain in versatility and sort of respond to people in different ways. And one can always be more versatile. So for instance, for me, it was especially salutary going to India, where people come from such a different culture and from such a different, even you could say, class background. Of course, caste is in India, but there's class as well. And such a different culture, as you know, in your relationship with Nagapriya, they communicate in such a different way at first face. But I had to learn to open myself up to other modes of connecting. And I remember connecting with somebody who had been quite severely affected by cerebral palsy. He just couldn't articulate himself conceptually. I sort of learned that I could tune into him, as it were, viscerally or psychically, maybe better. And I could pick him up. So one needs to sort of develop a greater versatility in that way. Bhante was supreme at this. He taking somebody in ways that one didn't even really realize or couldn't see. So yes, I would say that I've had to learn that I can actually connect with anybody else who's actually a little bit willing. But I've got to find the right way of doing so. And I'm far from particularly good at this, but one needs to try to find the ways. So can I turn the question back on you? What about you? How do you connect?
Well, first of all, I was just thinking that we started talking about intergenerational friendship, but now you're talking about intercultural friendship.
Well, yes.
The possibility
with intergenerational added on. Yeah.
And it makes me think about how friendship becomes a way to transcend our sense of separation and the differences between us, and even a way to transcend a kind of limited view of who we are. Because if you're trying to make friends in the way that you described with someone who has cerebral palsy or someone from India, you can't just operate how you habitually operate. You have to recognize that actually you've got certain ways of interacting that maybe this person won't understand or it won't work particularly well. And it forces one to question who you are and how you can possibly connect with others. To answer the question kind of at a more personal level, I think the first thing that I would say is that the way in which people have shown me friendship has given me the kind of the strength and resources to be able to offer friendship to others. So one of the outstanding key experiences that I had when I came into contact with Triratna is to meet people who were friendly to me and willing to make friends with me without seemingly any ulterior motive. And it was so new and spectacular that it was quite hard to believe it. It was quite hard to take in what was actually going on. I'd like to give a brief mention to Arta Priya, who might hear this at some point. And when I met Arta Priya, he showed friendship to me in a way that it was very, very hard for me to understand because I'd not experienced it before. He didn't want anything from me. He just wanted to offer me friendship. So I think, so maybe there's a clue in there in terms of thinking about my own approach. I think very often, or it's easy to go in relation to enter into a relationship with someone else, expecting something from it and thinking about what I will get from it. And I find that doesn't work very well, starting with that platform. So if I think, well, I'm not entering a relationship with this person in order to get something from it, it seems to me to give a much cleaner starting point. And then it allows me to be a lot more receptive and attentive to the person. And I think that, well, that helps me to start off, if you like. I can be a bit shy. I'll be honest with you, Subhuti. I can be a bit shy and a bit quiet.
Surely not.
But the experience of moving to Mexico and forming meaningful friendships with people who are from a different culture than mine, and who speak a different language from the language that I learned as a child, is really, really a fantastic process of learning about myself and learning about my own obstacles, my own limitations. But it's been very, very liberating as well to recognize that I can just put myself in front of somebody and say hello and see where it goes. It's not like I'm not a mega expert in communication, but there's a willingness. I think you have to have a willingness there. To enter into relationship with people, and then to me it starts from there. If you've got a certain willingness and maybe a certain persistence, then usually something will start to emerge.
Yes, it's a creative endeavor rather than a formula. That you don't know what's going to happen, and you don't know even who you're going to be as a result of that connection. I wanted to pick up something you said earlier about, what really what it amounted to was self-transcendence, because this is something very important to me in the theme of friendship. You know, when you come into a different culture, you're trying to connect with somebody, you have to go beyond your own culture, and indeed you have to accept and recognize your own conditioning. It's a very important theme, isn't it? That you recognize who you are, where you come from, how you come to see the world from that point of view, and so on. And you can't ever stop that. I can't ever stop being English. I can't stop being white. I can't stop being male. I can't stop being from a particular class or whatever. But I can accept responsibility for those and not identify with them. And in entering into friendship with another person, you are having to let go a little bit of your own conditioning. The more different they are from you, the more you're having to let go of that. And Bhante speaks of friendship as a path, effectively, of course, with all other paths joined up in it. But in coming into a relationship with somebody else, you go beyond yourself, and something can happen between you that is more than either of you. And I've experienced that from time to time.
And I think you also have to recognize that other people are different from you. But what I mean by that is that our crude way of thinking about people is they're more or less us in somebody else's body. And we sort of start with that assumption because we know all we know is ourselves. So we have to imagine others from the perspective of being ourselves. But the more we come into contact with people who have very different experiences from us, such as in terms of age, as we've spoken about, or in terms of culture or race, we're faced with the fact that our way of being as a being is not the only way. You know, we're just one way in which human consciousness manifests itself, one very particular, maybe even peculiar way in which it does. And it's very, for me, it's certainly being here in Mexico has made me have to face a lot of my assumptions about
yeah,
what I should be like and what others should be like.
yeah, yeah, yeah. They don't understand your cynical English jokes.
Yeah, for instance, or that they don't understand my facial expressions is one of the things that
Right.
happen quite
Yeah,
quite
yeah,
often. Yeah.
yeah,
But
yeah,
fortunately, people usually get over that, and they realize that that they get over their idea of what English people are like,
yeah, yeah.
and realize that, well, okay, yeah, he is English, but he's not so bad after all.
Mm, mm, mm. I think that for me, one of the key things with developing friendship is well, this theme of taking delight in seeing another person as was something delightful, a bit like going into a garden and looking at flowers. You don't go into the garden with categorizing them, what you might do, but you're only really going to appreciate it if you're just taking delight and appreciating the beauty of the flowers, even of the weeds, if you like. So I think that that's a key, isn't it? You go into a friendship, into a new friendship, with a sense that you're discovering something new and taking delight in that discovery, even when it's sometimes difficult and awkward.
Well, I think, I mean, I love that about taking delight. And I was thinking also that, well, opening yourself up to a friendship obviously can make you feel quite vulnerable. Other people can hurt you. But equally, if we're not willing to take that risk, there isn't the possibility of that delight that you're talking about. And so we just remain distant from one another, isolated. I suspect, Subhuti, I'm not sure about this, but I suspect that we're coming towards the end of the time that we have allotted for this. So I wondered if you wanted to think about some closing remarks.
Nothing immediately springs to mind. I suppose I simply want to reiterate that Sangha is built on friendships and the network of friendships. And again, to reiterate the very great importance of intergenerational friendships, which at a time in our movement in Britain, at least, and even more so in India, really began to die. We had to make special efforts to reach out to young people. It seems extraordinary, doesn't it? But it's a reflection on the nature of modern culture. In India, it was quite extreme. You hardly saw a young person unless they were the son or daughter of an order member, and they would head for the door as quickly as they could because it was so boring. So we had to make a special effort. But that special effort really consisted in befriending. So if that's a problem around your centre, if you look at the generational spread, I'm sure it's much better than it was in most of the movement everywhere. I think then you need to pay attention to this theme of intergenerational friendship and examine it. It's something very special we have to offer the world, a world where this is less and less common, in my estimation. Closing remarks from Nagapriya.
Well, I mean, I was just thinking how fortunate I've been to be able to enjoy intergenerational friendships and feeling a lot of gratitude towards you. But I was also thinking about what was it that enabled that to happen? And obviously, yes, your generosity and so on. But I was thinking about from my side, what did I do to enable that or to make that happen? And I think one thing was just taking the risk, really taking the risk to approach you and see what happened. I'm saying that because I hear people often say, oh, I'd like to get to know such and such a person better, but he or she is so busy and doesn't seem to have any time, so I'm sure it's impossible. And I feel quite sad when I hear that. Because my view is that if there's a human being in the world that wants to be my friend, I want to know who they are. Where are
lucky
they?
You are. How fortunate you are.
Introduce me, please. So I think that if we go to others with that aspiration to want to make friends with them, be friends with them, I am sure that 99.9% of people will respond to that in a positive way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we no, I'm encouraging us to take that risk to make a move to befriend someone who we want to befriend.
Yeah. By the way, I never thought of you as shy. I thought of you as shyly bold.
Yeah, I knew you were going to contradict me on that one, but I can be shy at times in large public settings. But but also as well, obviously, the response that somebody gives you informs how you then feel. So if you if you approach someone maybe a little shyly in the first instance, and they give you a strong welcome, but you immediately start to relax and feel like, oh, this is actually okay, I can continue with this. And that was my experience with you, that you gave me that welcome.
And from the other side, one feels that if somebody approaches one with a genuine desire to connect, you want to respond. Of course you do. Because what else is there in life? That's all there is in the end, is our connections with each other. That's all there is. That's what enlightenment is. It's connection. It was the nature of enlightenment, wasn't it? That after the Buddha's enlightenment and the mythic story of the first 7 weeks, he wanted to communicate. Enlightenment had to communicate. It's the nature of enlightenment.
So on that fairly cosmic note, I think we're going to close the dialogue for today.
What a pity.
And yeah, I know we've just got started, but we're going to do something else quite interesting in a moment, Subhuti, that you will like. So I want to say thank you very much to Subhuti for making the time to do this dialogue with me. It's always a delight and a pleasure to speak to you. And thanks everyone for listening. I hope you found it interesting and relevant to the theme of Sangha. And I think just to maybe briefly summarize, I think we're very much celebrating the value of spiritual friendship and the importance of consciously cultivating friends within the context of the Sangha, and the value that comes from that, the benefits that come from that.
Well, we're celebrating our friendship as a microcosm of Sangha.
Yeah, exactly. As an example of how it's done. Yeah,
absolutely. The very best example. We won't tell them all the bad details.
So yeah, thanks very much, Subhuti. And I'm going to segue into what follows now, which has to do with our Sangha in Merida, Venezuela. I've actually been to Merida, Venezuela twice. The first time I almost couldn't get out of the country afterwards, but I eventually managed to. They wouldn't let me out. But anyway, we have as many of you will know, we have a center in Merida, Venezuela. And at the moment, Venezuela is suffering very, very tough times economically and politically. And people in our Sangha in Merida are struggling very much. So our center there in Merida, Venezuela is really an oasis in the current conditions of Venezuela. And the new chair, Abhayasara, has recently initiated a project of reformation. That isn't the right word in English, is it? Refurbishment, of refurbishing the center there in Venezuela. And they need our help with that. They need our help to create this space where people can come and encounter the Dharma. We've got quite a few people in Venezuela who've asked for ordination and mitras and so on. I actually had the privilege 2.5 years ago of ordaining one of the men from Merida, Venezuela, who's there now, called Achilamati. So today we hope to raise some money. We would like to raise £3,000 that will help Merida and other Triratna centers around the world continue to offer the Dharma to others. If 75 of us gave £40, which is $50, and a similar number of euros, we could raise that £3,000 today and help with Merida's refurbishment and also other centres and groups across the world. And there is a link in the chat box where you can now give whatever you can. So if you can help with that, it will make a massive difference to our Sangha in Merida, Venezuela, but also elsewhere. And we are now going to watch a short video about Merida.
Hola, soy Abhaya Sara. Soy la directora del Centro Budista de Mérida en Venezuela.
Abhaya Sara lives in Merida, which is a city in Venezuela, and she is the chairwoman of the Triratna Buddhist Center there.
Vivimos en una ciudad sumergida en un país donde nos está afectando mucho una crisis política y económica, donde las cosas se están volviendo muy difíciles y sobre todo para los jóvenes.
At the moment in Venezuela, there's a lot of social difficulties, there's a political crisis, and life there is particularly difficult, but in particular for young people.
Y es por eso que aprovechamos la época de la pandemia para hacer una remodelación de la casa, para poder inspirar a las personas que tocan nuestras puertas.
During the COVID crisis, they realized they had an opportunity to restructure the Buddhist Center to make it more adequate and apt to reach out with the Dharma, especially to a lot of these young people.
La razón principal por la cual queremos difundir el Dharma es porque hemos visto que la gente, especialmente en este momento, siente mucha necesidad de acercarse a un camino espiritual.
So at the moment we see a big need, there is a big need there for people to involve themselves with a spiritual path, given the crisis and the problems they have.
Sí, en la planta baja de la casa solía estar una comunidad que ya no formará parte no quedará por fuera, digamos. Y entonces nuestro gran interés se ha puesto en separar las dos plantas y en la planta de arriba poner todo lo que es centro budista. Y ampliamos todos los espacios, con las expectativas de recibir el doble de personas de las que actualmente vienen.
We want to use both spaces for a Buddhist center. What was downstairs was the community which has moved out, and we want to use both of those spaces to be able to reach out to a lot more people with classes, with activities, study groups, etc.
Estoy muy agradecida, súper agradecida por toda la Sangha que ha colaborado, todas las personas que han estado detrás de este proyecto. Y el sábado que celebraremos el Día de la Sangha, espero verlos en línea a todos.
So I'm very, very grateful, and I'm very moved by all the help that we've received. Much more is needed, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all on Sangha Day.
So thanks for showing the video. Finally, we got there. If you haven't had yet a chance to give to the appeal, then the link is in the chat. And if you can help with this, it will make a huge difference to the Merida Sangha and other centers across the world.